You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there. My name is Kelly Barner, and today is Friday, July 12th, 2024.
6.
Quick question for you. Where did you find this podcast? Did you get a notification from a podcast app, or was it delivered to you in your inbox? If you have to wait for your podcast app to update to get the latest Art of Procurement audio, I recommend subscribing to our mailing list. We'll make sure all new content is delivered to your inbox with no more searching. To sign up, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe or check the link in today's show notes.
5.
In this week's Art of Procurement podcast episode, Philip Eidson had a long overdue and very timely conversation with self-avowed contrarian thinker Alan Veek, CEO and founder at Summit Procurement. Alan is one of the few voices in procurement who is speaking out publicly against all of the hype and frenzy around AI and its impact on procurement. While Alan himself is a fan of AI and has quite an optimistic view of its capabilities, he still thinks we're overestimating what it can do today. In this short clip, Alan talks about the 3 main use cases where he sees AI bringing value to procurement now. Let's listen.
It feels like we're at the top of the classic hype cycle, because now there is demand for, okay, I understand conceptually, now show me the money. What are those use cases? And those use cases are a little bit fewer, far in between, and increasing, but still, I think we're relatively or very early in the journey. You said there's a couple of areas that come to mind for you about, where you've seen generative AI, for example, in use. What do those look like?
Yeah, I would say the top 3 that come to mind for me, number 1 is supplier discovery. Yep. So really going out and combing the rich sources of data that a generative AI model can go grab to tell you who the top suppliers are and who might not be under consideration for you today. So you could, that's one of the primary responsibilities of good category management. And I think good procurement in general is continually comb the world for the best sources of supply. So that's certainly one. Number 2 is, I think, along the supplier management function, which is as you think about trying to understand the risk that exists in your supply base, keeping tabs on your suppliers, what's happening to them, what the news, kind of what the news is saying about them, what the sentiment analysis, what reputational analysis exists out there on them. That's super important. And generative AI seems to have a strong ability to comb that and summarize it pretty well. And then the third one is the weakest one for me, because I've seen the demos that show that AI can do great data analysis, but I myself haven't necessarily been able to get it to work as slick as the demo shows, where I upload an Excel file with hundreds of thousands of rows of data and it comes back with answers. It still takes a lot of massaging to get there, which it always has. And I think that's, we probably need a few more iterations of the AI tech before we see it doing things automatically for us.
To hear the full episode, go to artofprocurement.com/podcast or search for Art of Procurement and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also click the direct link in today's show notes.
4.
In this week's episode of Art of Supply, I had the opportunity to share my interview with Adrian Ristow, Executive Director of Project Last Mile and Project Director for the Coca-Cola Company, and David Canaruto, Private Sector Relationship Manager at the Global Fund, to talk about the lessons they have learned along the way. For over a decade, Project Last Mile has worked to make life-saving medicines available in the most remote parts of Africa. This collaboration includes the efforts and resources of organizations like the Global Fund, USAID, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They have had an amazing impact on African healthcare supply chains and systems. But at the end of the day, it is the working relationships they have built and the decision-making frameworks they use that have allowed them to drive needed change at scale. To hear our conversation, go to artofprocurement.com/supply or click the link in today's show notes.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
Last week, I came across an article in the Wall Street Journal that talks about the tendency each of us has to say yes or to say no when faced with a choice. Adults make between 33,000 and 35,000 decisions every day. That's according to Vanessa Bonds, a professor of organizational behavior at Cornell University. It would be exhausting to make that many decisions as one-offs, and so we each have a default response. Me? I'm a yes person. I don't like to disappoint others, and I enjoy doing interesting things. It also happens to be why I don't have 5 minutes of time to myself most days. While each of us is default yes or no, neither one is better than the other. We should all be challenging ourselves to strike the right balance of both, allowing our long-term objectives to guide us rather than short-term preferences or reactions. Check out today's show notes for a link to the full article.
2.
A past Art of Supply interview guest, Jeffrey Goldstein from Onward Global, sent me an interesting article this week. The title, "How Can Brands Minimize China Prison Labor Risk and Headlines?" is almost a trick question because it is quite possible that they can't, despite their best intentions and efforts. In the article, Jeff talks about a recent news story that affects the company Milwaukee Tool. They have been sued by a former Chinese prisoner who claims to have been forced to manufacture the company's products while imprisoned in China. Milwaukee Tools is countering, stating that while investigations haven't found evidence that prison labor is being used in their supply chain, they have already cut ties with the factories involved. This is the kind of story that makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. The challenges associated with verifying a supply chain is forced labor-free, and keeping it that way never end. I obviously don't have any firsthand knowledge of the situation, but it is hard to believe that Milwaukee Tool or Walmart or Home Depot, where their products are sold, would knowingly allow prison labor in their supply chain to reduce cost. This creates a situation where they're doing their best and those headlines are coming anyway. For more detail, including Jeffrey's sound advice for avoiding this kind of headline, read his article linked in today's show notes.
1.
In lieu of recommending one event in this week's Procurement 6, I would like to recommend all of them. I track non-promotional upcoming events on the Buyer's Meeting Point industry calendar, and while I recommend a few each Monday, all of them are listed with descriptions and links so you can register in the full calendar. Check out today's show notes for a link to the calendar. And if you happen to be speaking in or hosting an upcoming event, reach out and let me know. I'll be glad to list it.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.